Good evening, everybody. This is Module 4's importance of strategy in your business case. I'm Steve Riccobono, your professor, and tonight we have a guest speaker interview, one of two, actually. He'll be making a second guest appearance. Derek Chappell, Enterprise Account Executive at FullStory. I wanted to briefly introduce and tell you a little bit about Derek's background. He's currently, as I said, the Enterprise Account Executive at FullStory, and he is delivering digital experience intelligent solutions for companies like Peloton, Duolingo, Churchill Downs, Lucid Motors, Rivian, and Brooks Brothers. Hopefully you get discounts on some of those, Derek. And previously, he was the Director of Financial Services Solutions at Energage, Senior Account Executive at Paycom. We're implementing employee engagement and HRIS solutions for companies like Aflac, Capital One, Pratt Institute, where I met Derek, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, and the Roman Catholic Diocese. So would like to just say welcome, Derek, and thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule. And tonight's itinerary is actually the agenda for the evening is just the introductions. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the relationship, everybody, between the business case and the business strategy. And then we'll get to the interview, and hopefully there'll be some time for questions. I plan on having this go for about an hour. So with the next steps is really for me to talk a bit about the strategy versus the business case, and in part for what Derek and I will be talking about this evening, about the relationship we've got here between business strategy and a business case. And it is sometimes hard to unlink them, and at the same time, sometimes it's very clear. And I know that when some of you were preparing your business cases, it was hard to find that balance of where it is. And really, strategic fit is what your business case should be to the business strategy, if that makes sense. The business case should not be a strategy, right? The strategy is first, so hence the chicken and the egg there, but the strategy is first, and then a business case is really how it should be going. And you need to think about how does your business case support the organization's strategies, and that's important and something we're going to be talking about tonight. But the business case, again, I can't emphasize enough, it shouldn't be an action. It should be a strategy that aligns with your company's goals or a strategic plan if it has a strategic plan. I know not every company, if it's a small company, it doesn't or might not have a strategic plan, but it may have goals or goals for growth and deliverables, or maybe striving to be the largest provider or doing something. And so your business case should be in line with that. It shouldn't be against it, because then we'll talk about it tonight about just how that doesn't work for your organization in many ways. And that's why strategy first, then a business case, right? So figuring out what that strategy is, what you need to do, whether it's increasing revenue or implementing software, which in many organizations and many of your plans that you're doing, it's talking about the software, but why that software? Why then? Why now? Right? Perfect example, I'm in the middle of getting ready to implement a new HRMS system at Pratt, and working with a software company that will help integrate it. And my strategy was something needs to integrate with our overall HRIS system. I found that software that could link both, right? So I've got that because I know our IT department's thing is we're not getting rid of that HRIS system. That's staying, but I need other modules to help assist with what that main system lacks. So I have that strategy in there of this will help us become a lot more nimbler, able to onboard people quickly, have things linked together, right? So there's that. My business case is we make things go quicker and easier, and it's part of the strategy of still keeping it all into one piece of software and not 10 different pieces, and actually consolidating many different pieces, right? So that's when we talk about the strategy and the business case shouldn't be the strategy. So with that, Derek, I wanted to really start first by saying in the text of reading about understanding the strategic landscape and building a case for change and identifying those options for change. That's the topic this week that they're sharing. And so um, in that, in your role in technology, I'm sure you've seen a lot of good and bad business cases. And in your role really being on the sales side, that really kind of helps or makes or breaks for you, I'm sure. So
Mhm.
what makes a business case not work? What's missing?
Honestly, Stephen, I think your introduction here was kind of perfect. And I think when a business case fails to influence or drive a decision, it's because there is a lack of understanding of the overall strategy. Um, Particularly understanding where the business is, the challenges that individuals are facing, um, understanding what an ideal future state looks like, um, and then being able to actually dive in with your stakeholders and do the discovery needed to one, uncover all those things and be able to speak their language, be able to clearly communicate and articulate how you are going to change things for them, how you're going to actually be able to then measure success with them. Um, and this, any decision that folks are making, you know, whether it's at business or at home, there's always almost a reluctance. People get nervous about making decisions. So if there's gaps and people feel those gaps when you're trying to say, hey, this is what we should be doing and why, and if you can't articulate that in a way that speaks to their day-to-day business or process, it's not gonna go very well. So I think really being able to understand and articulate around the strategy of the business is going to be that crux that is going to make or break your opportunity to actually drive a decision that's best for the company.
Great. So what makes a business case? I know you kind of articulated what they have to articulate to not make it bad, but what have you seen makes the business case work best? Like what's in alignment? What elements are included in that make it like, okay, this is perfect. This makes it easy.
Yeah. I'm going to start at a like just a foundational level here, Stephen. You have to put the time in and have the right conversations and ask the right questions. This is something that I feel like a lot of folks, I'll see younger individuals that I work with, or just who don't have as much experience in building these types of cases, they skip a lot of opportunities to ask questions, to be able to understand what the person on the other side of the table is going through, what they're trying to solve. And I will tell you, Stephen, you probably can vouch for this too. 75% of folks that I talk to on a daily basis don't know what their challenges are, don't know the problems or the extent. They probably have an idea, right? But everybody is incredibly busy. Everybody's constantly engaged, right? One way or the other. So, um, unless you have the opportunity and spend the time to have very in-depth conversations to help to one understand what it is that they're doing today, what it is that is getting in their way from reaching that overall business strategy, um, getting an understanding of, or not even getting understand. Usually, it's helping them understand. Hey, like, what does your ideal world look like? If there was a way to make your life easier, whether it's with this system or new processes or professional services, what would that look like? Um, it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be very difficult to actually drive that conversation, create the urgency it needs, because folks, a lot of the time there's quite a large number of people that are involved, especially when we're talking about, larger scale businesses. There are a lot of folks involved. It takes a lot of coordination. Um, so being able to clearly and succinctly communicate what it is that we're going to solve for, how we're going to track success, what that ideal future state looks like, that is when you'll be able to say, okay, team, this is what we need, because you'll be able to then connect the dots. Now, if that does not happen, what's going to happen is, and like, what's going to happen is you're not going to be able to come up with a list of what I would call required capabilities or requirements in general. And if you do not have that, the chances of success of being able to make a decision or execute on a project is going to be very difficult. Does that answer your question, Stephen?
Yeah, no, it does. So who should they be having that dialogue with? Where does it start foundationally? Because obviously you don't walk into the CEO's office and say, hey, Jack, I've got a deal. Let's talk about this software I want to implement, right?
Stephen, that's a good question. That can, I feel like sometimes when it comes to driving decisions or pushing an initiative, identifying, your champion in a sense, right, of the cause can be really hard. But I can tell you what to look for. It's going to be the individual that ultimately will probably own the majority of kind of the KPIs you want to influence, and that has the internal collateral to bring in the other stakeholders that will influence the decision.
Yeah. So for those who don't know what KPI is.
Sorry. Oh my gosh.
It's okay.
Key performance indicator, team. So in KPIs, I apologize for using an acronym there. KPIs vary. It depends on what type of project it is. It depends on who you're talking to, what sector you're working in. But it's essentially the way you measure success.
And this class, honestly, the title of it is, it is about data analytics, and so we are talking about, how that all kind of works out, and part of the purpose of the business case is because you really have to get to know the key performance indicators. You need to really, one of the strategies that sometimes maybe people don't realize for this course is that, this is business acumen and data analytics for effective HR leadership, right? And so one of the things is to really understand and know about the data from your company, right?
Yeah.
And it's, you have to know. And so at, my institute, I know, what our student enrollment is, what it isn't, right? What our goals are, where we're trending towards. What's our dropout rate, what's our success rate, for faculty and staff, what's our turnover rate, longevity issues, and all of that. That's what an HR leader needs to know, right? It's all those key performance metrics that that keep the company going. I know for my boss, who's in charge of the money, right? I know how the money is going, right? What's coming in, what's going out, right? What makes her happy, what makes her not happy is, right, not a lot. Right?
How is Kathy? I hope she's well.
Yeah, no, she's doing really, now that we are in a positive cash flow, she's doing very well. And so, but it is doing that. It's knowing that as an HR professional, getting in that data, knowing the salaries. But, for me, it's knowing about, well, how will that impact, right? And if we say 3% across the board increases for everybody, what does that mean at the end of the day, right? So if you're working on a business case for, building equity, we've already done an equity increases at Pratt. We've done that. We're now in our third year of kind of progressively doing it, because I figured out in the beginning, here's the X amount of money that it's going to cost. Yeah. Told my boss, and she was like, oh, that's a lot of money. I want to do it, but that's a lot. And I was like, we could break it up into small chunks, right? We move everybody up to the 25th one year. Then the next year, we moved everybody up to the 50th percentile, right? And so it was a gradual progression. It was a business case for, but this will provide equity where we have not had equity, and benchmarking and sustainability, right? So there's the business case built in right there. The strategy was to tie into our DEI plan, which called for equity across the Institute. So that's sort of indications of where we want to go. So, I always hate to dwell on the bad, but can you give us some examples that you've seen about business cases gone bad? Like what was missing from it, or how did it sort of slowly dissolve into not being achieved at all?
The good part here, Stephen, is if it's going to go bad, it's right from the start. And I hate to I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but it really comes down to knowing the strategy. If you're doing the upfront work to understand the business, then you're going to be in a really good spot, because you're going to be able to, again, clearly and effectively communicate what it is that you're fixing, what it is that you're going to influence. And ultimately, these are the criteria that we're able to check the box. And a trend that I'm actually seeing, Stephen, is if you understand the business strategy very well, and you can present this, and you can speak the language of the different stakeholders in the room, talk about their KPIs, the actual business case, the numbers, turns into a check the box. Yeah. You're largely, I mean, Stephen, there's a lot of different opinions around projections for business cases, and even the people in the room largely won't agree on what the actual influence will be. But if you can do the work for the team in a way that tells them, hey, this is what we need, and this is why, and this is what it's going to mean to you, you're 90% there. At that point, you might submit your business case. They might read it, they might not. But I find over the past 2 years, maybe 50% at most will even ask for it anymore. Which has been interesting, an interesting development, because Stephen, back when you and I worked together, it was every single time. Like you would submit a business case, projections. Hey, here's the key performance indicators we're going to influence, and here's what it's going to mean to your organization. But I've seen the tide change there. People are actually pulling out of the numbers, and they want to understand the narrative, because if they understand that, then they can go to the board. They can talk to them, say, hey, here's what, if you can take the work out of their hands and give them something that's packaged nice and neatly, communicates very clearly, the numbers are icing on the cake.
Yeah, nope, no, I agree. I think it's in part why, when you're looking to really interact, especially the software field, right? And usually we just re-implemented our time and attendance software through Kronos. And in part, the decision was made in part because we had a software vendor that we were supposed to transition to, which turned out to be not so good. And and when we looked at the way Kronos was implemented the first time, we said, we could do better than that. But what I was able to do is also be able to promise you will no longer need to submit timesheets and then, submit timesheets electronically, but then have to fill out a paper form for overtime. And everybody's accruals will work out actually correctly. So no one will have to go in and manually update it. And we'll actually work on, all the collective bargaining agreement rules for all overtime and double time and half time and time and quarter. And, you get like triple time if it's a Sunday and it's a blue moon and the stars are in alignment, you put them all in. And really it was the business case didn't even need to be made. It was sort of like, okay, when are you starting? Right? Because I had the buy-in already. I already had convinced them because I knew all the pain points and the people that were experiencing it, and said, I've got the trust of the staff and the support staff, because I've been able to do that, in my time there. But yeah, my business case wasn't more, because the software actually wasn't like it cost us more money. It was a break even amount. That wasn't really like, hey, it's cheaper, that's why we should go for it. It was, we will eliminate a process, like several different processes, and staff who were actually spending their Sundays and Mondays to make sure that the weekly staff got paid, no longer had to do that.
Yeah.
It was, hey, look at that. They could walk in the door on Monday, they could press a few buttons, and then by noontime, the payroll was ready to be sent to payroll automatically, which never existed before. What files used to get sent to payroll were so bad that payroll used to have to manually enter in from that file, which seemed counterintuitive to me. So
bringing back my HRIS implementation, like PTSD.
Yeah, sorry, but it kind of goes to that, right? It goes to making sure that you really have everything in place, and once you've got that established. But to get to there, for all the folks here on the line that are looking and wondering about this, the reason why I'm making everybody go through the business case is to understand that background, understand those connections that you have to make are critically important. One of the things I think is, it's important, if you could help talk about what advice you can give to people about we talked about like who it is responsible for KPIs, but how to get in front of those people, right? What's the strategy for, even getting that acknowledgement? Because I've seen a few people that were hesitant about that, saying, it's been rejected before, but it really needs to be done, right? So when those are there, like what's the option?
Stephen, can I give a funny story about bad business cases before we jump into that one?
Please do.
Just a personal one. And like when I say you'll know it's heading in the wrong direction when you start, because I look back at this now and I'm like, wow, it's clear as day. There was a building, like a industrial supply company out of Brooklyn that I had worked with, and had been trying to work with them for a very long time, and was working directly with the CFO. And after maybe 18 months, we get in the room, and he wants to see our business case. So I went in there and I used Paycom's standard business ROI model that would, it was very numbers driven. Well, here's what we're going to do, and from a productivity standpoint and all this. He read it, he looked me in the eye, goes, this is, he used the real words, but this is BS, and tore it up in front of my face and threw it in the trash can. So this is what I guess, I've learned it firsthand, for better or worse. But if you can't walk into that room and, like Stephen says, tell them how it's going to change the way their processes are today for the better, and you lead with the number piece, it is not going to land. I've learned that.
But you need the data to back you up.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, you definitely do.
Yeah, but missing that strategy piece, missing that day-to-day operational influence piece, I gotta say, it was a tough way to learn my lesson, but I didn't make the same mistake twice.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not the falling down, it's the getting up that matters.
It's getting up. All right, so advice on getting senior level approval. I think this comes down to be very in tune with what's going on in different executives' worlds on a day-to-day basis. Again, it's going to come back to you doing all that proper research, question asking ahead of time, so that you do know the pain that people are going through. You know what their subordinates are coming across each day, where they're losing productivity, where they could be, better helping customers or, external stakeholders. Because again, if you can, it doesn't need to be a lot. Probably the shorter the better. And especially like in the world we're living in, being able to put a message together that clearly communicates the value of the time that you are requesting and the reason why you want to talk and the reason why they should spend their time, energy, and ultimately their budget, right, on this effort. That's going to get you where you need to go. If you come and you only have pieces of the equation and there's a lot of gaps, there's other folks vying for these executives' attention. There's only so much bandwidth they have in the day. They are going to go with what feels like a solid bet and path forward.
Nope, that makes actually a lot of sense. And I think, yeah, it kind of goes to making sure that it's short, sweet, and to the point. Kind of like that show Elevator Pitch, where people
Yeah.
are pitching their business idea in the elevator, and before the doors open up, you have to be done making your pitch. I'm not saying it has to be that short and that quick, but it should be succinct. It should kind of grab at all the right places, like you said. So I completely agree.
And Stephen, there's also things out there, there's so much social media out there. There's so much, if the folks in the room end up working with a company that's public, every quarter you're going to see a 10Q come out. You're going to see the biggest risk to the business in there.
Yep.
I'll tell you what, if you want to get your executives' attention, you go in there and find something that you can tie to the initiative that you're trying to push and say, hey, I noticed this was in our 10Q. Or I saw this was, on this news story or on social media somewhere. Here's what I've seen happening internally. Here's where I think we can get us, and these are the criteria I think we need to hit. Do you have time to discuss, how we can work together on this? They're going to want to talk to you.
So they're also learning in about this week about how they lay out all the options for the business case, right? All the possible outcomes. But they're learning about option 0 or the do nothing option as one of the strategies. How can you use that to your benefit when you're developing a convincing business case?
This is, again, it goes back to having those mission critical conversations up front with ultimately the folks that are going to be influenced by whatever initiative it is that you're working on. Because if you're trying to avoid the do nothing, you need to be able to paint a picture of what it is, what the pain that their coworkers are going through on a daily, day-to-day basis. Maybe it's the customer that's being impacted. Being able to share what it is, what it means for the company, if things remain the way they are. And there's like, it's kind of nice with this, right? Because at the end of the day, you're just giving the facts. You're stating what it means to continue living in this current state. Now, where this gets uncomfortable, or where you will ultimately get where you'll ultimately fall into that nothing gets done bucket, is if you do not have a way, or if you have not uncovered that or had those conversations, there's gonna be nothing you can do, because they're just gonna say, well, we don't see why do nothing's gonna actually be a bad thing. We'd rather use our budget for X, Y, and Z, because this doesn't sound like that big of a problem.
Yeah, so using it wisely it should be a impactful do nothing option. is what
Yes.
I'm
I
hearing you
mean,
say.
yeah, if I hate to use this word, but if you can't accurately describe the pain that every associated person with this initiative would feel, then go back, have those conversations, document it in a clear, concise way, and then have that conversation about doing nothing. But going into that conversation without having those pieces of the puzzle is not going to be effective.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Um, how important are certain data elements when creating a business case? Like what would you say? You mentioned KPIs, right?
Yeah.
What else is important when you're looking to, when you're sifting through to try to find what would be important?
Um,
And I know it's not a one size fits all, right? It depends
yeah, yeah.
on the project, but
It comes down to really, again, understanding how the folks in the room are going to measure their success,
yep.
like being able to use their nomenclature, um, and then the number. What I'll tell you, the numbers only matter if they come from them. If you come in with generic estimates, people are gonna wipe that away. So having their actual key performance indicators, how they want to measure success, what they want to be paying attention to, and then having them again. This is one of those things, like, it comes down to spending the time, but working with them to pull that data, good, recent, accurate information, um, and that's really, I mean, really, Stephen, I think that's the magic there. It's one, having the right indicators, or metrics in the business case, and then having the real data. And obviously, if this was an external situation, you're definitely going to need a mutual NDA. But if it's an internal situation, no problem. It's going to be a matter of time. It might take you a week and change to get that data, but I will tell you that week and change will make or break those numbers.
Yep. So I think, again, when we started talking about when we first started introducing the concepts about the strategy versus the business case and making sure we've got the strategic plan, where do you see sometimes projects that kind of slip with that, right? Like what the ones that are kind of teetering between both the chicken and the egg of, is this strategy or is this a business case? And how do you kind of pull it back into a business case?
Pull it back into a business case, as in, Stephen, I think it goes down to how you positioned it during the introduction and agenda today. I mean, to get to the business, you can't skip the strategy piece. If you do, you've got to go back, like, full stop. Like, if you're jumping ahead to where, hey, we're trying to put numbers together, but there's gaps in, there's gaps in understanding really what the challenges are to the organization. Maybe we haven't talked to certain departments, that can be influenced by this. We haven't been able to nail down or really solidify what it is, or what it is that we want to use to measure success. Pump the brakes.
Yep.
It's not worth going any farther. Like, you don't want to be teetering back and forth between trying to jump to a business case. There's so many competing demands in the workplace today that you're going to get one shot at both these sides of the equation, because people's time's expensive. And also, once you lose your momentum with driving a decision, that can just as much influence your success as anything. So if you go back and or if you try to jump forward with a business case and that's really not fully baked, that's missing pieces, and you get into the room with the CEO and he goes, well, it does X, this project's going to do X, Y, and Z. Why have we not talked to operations and support? He's going to say, go back, do it again. And you're going to have, it's just going to be repeat work. So I think making sure from a strategy perspective that your position is fully baked before you try to go in and actually project what it is that we're going to do for the organization from a metric standpoint.
So what if you've got, you're making the rounds, right? You're going to IT and it potentially your business case impacts IT, it may impact HR, it may impact another division, and you've got one of the divisions that's just not in agreement. How are you able to move forward if you've got that naysayer that's saying, no, I don't really think that's a good idea, but everybody else is on board?
Oh my gosh, this is I'm actually about to finish a agreement up with this exact situation. A QA team was a quality assurance team. They basically do a lot of testing around software. If there's a new feature release, they'll be the ones on the front line running it through its test, making sure there's no bugs, all that good stuff. This is going to happen. This is going to happen probably it's going to happen more often than it's not going to happen. And why? It's because change is uncomfortable. People are stressed out with everything that they have to do on a day-to-day basis. And guess what? You just gave them more work and stuff to learn, and they're not going to be excited about it, right? But again, it goes back to one, really understanding what their situation is today. But Stephen, whenever I get stuck in we'll call it a pickle, right? Whenever I get stuck in a pickle, like where you have a holdout, and the best thing that you can do is ask why, and get concrete objections from those stakeholders. Because until you have those concrete objections, there's nothing you can do. But once you do have them, that's when you can start rationalizing. That's when you can take your learnings from a challenge and pain perspective and essentially step into their role in a sense and communicate with them. All right, I've heard you. Yes. All right. And what you're going to find is they know nothing about what you're trying to do. They're just saying no. Then you can move on to the education side of things and say, all right, yes, I totally hear you. Here's how we do this. This is what future state will look like. And that thing you were worried about really doesn't, and I'm just talking, being fictitious here, but it's really not a problem. So, in short, it's getting their concrete objections on paper. That is when you can start to make progress. What will not work is to go in there and for you to start trying to sell them on whatever it is you're doing. That is not going to work. They are going to put their wall up. They are going to use, and I don't mean to be like, I don't want this to come negative. This is just kind of how it is sometimes. But, if you go in there and say, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, we're going to make your life better. They are going to give you every bullet you give them, they're going to give you 5 reasons what you said, or about, mixing up my words here. They're going to give you 5 reasons about why what you said will not work for them.
That makes sense. And so with those, because when I usually teach about change management, right, it's what's the carrot, right? What's the stick? What's the reason to get to the top and over the top, right? And that's part of change management. It's that automatic human response to not want change, right? Yep. And they want the whiffum, the what's in it for me. Why am I going to want to do this? Why am I, when I sold them on the revamp of Kronos, I don't want to say sold them, but the payroll manager was very defensive about um, the current software and why it wasn't working, and actually blaming the software for it not working, when the real truth, when she outlined, well, this is what's happening. And I was like, so that's programming, that's not effectively implementing software
Yeah.
and making sure it's actually working and having everybody mixed in, and that's one of the things. I always say to people, if you want to successfully try to make sure you get the best buy-in,
Yep.
bring in the naysayers into the process.
Yep.
And for those reasons, because you know you don't want it's great to have the cheerleaders that are like, oh my god, this is the best thing, Derek, you're amazing, this is great. But you want them, I mean, you want that too sometimes, I suppose. But you also want those that are going to give you the pushback, that are going to say, no, this isn't going to work because I've got X, Y, and Z, and your software can't do that, or your project won't be able to solve for that, right?
And
And that could give you those key objection of things to say, but we could, or maybe that's not where it belongs, right? Maybe we could put it somewhere else.
yep.
So yeah, so I think that's kind of key to always. I always say it's sometimes painful to have people that are not in agreement with your side of things, but I think sometimes those good difficult conversations make it sometimes worthwhile.
Well, Stephen, you can give me your opinion here. I find that it will often come from some of the people that will benefit the most.
Yes. That is actually yes, the truth, where sometimes you feel like you're banging your head against the wall because you're like, you are going to be the biggest champion once this is done. And sure enough, when we rolled out, like, and I understood the payroll manager's pain. There was a
Yeah.
file coming from software that was absolutely useless. It had wrong accrual rates, it had wrong salaries, it had wrong everything, wrong time, it wasn't accruing things right. It was just useless, and it was just costing them more work to try to get it to work for payroll, that they had to manipulate a file, right?
Yeah.
So now they get a file that actually works, and instead of spending a day on fixing that file, it's uploaded in 5 minutes and they're off and ready and running. So what used to take a day for preparation is no longer even an issue. It's not even a blink of an eye. And when we do get one or two errors of things, it's because it's a very eccentric, like, oh, employee X was working 48 hours straight and the system didn't know what to do, whether to pay a double time, triple time, or time and a half on a Sunday, but also it's part of a Monday and a weekend and it was a holiday. It was sort of like you're never going to get a rule for that kind of thing, right? So it's the one-off issues, right? And so yeah, and now it's like, oh my god, Kronos is amazing. It's like, oh, isn't that amazing? Because you were yelling at the sales rep during that initial call. So it does. I think it really does help. And you find, I think that's one of the key elements when you're working with folks on how to do it, because I've worked in the software industry as well for a number of years, and yeah, and even just being a techie myself and being on the other side and in HR, yeah, you really have to, I've implemented so many different softwares at so many different organizations. You really want to do that. You want to try to, but you also want to try to make. It's easy for me, honestly, to take a look at a process and say, this isn't working and this is so painful. Why are we doing it this way? Right? What's the why? Why are we doing this? And how can we make that better? Isn't there a solution that would automate this or make this less painful? Right? That's, when everybody's looking for a business case to do, one of the easier fruits is to pick a process that's not working and find a way to automate it, because there's automation for everything. I swear there is. Whether it's expense reports or, even Full Story. I mean, they're doing some really amazing stuff there to automate and to help people automatically look. I remember, don't even want to say the year that I was working at register.com, and search engine optimization was new, right? And it was a new thing. And there were people with like this just makes me feel old now. But it was brand new, but we couldn't get people to be our search engine optimization manager at the organization. And we were register.com. We were the company that registered domain names, right? And we couldn't get people to literally be part of it because we couldn't sell, because it was such a hot market, that people were kind of constantly looking, and so to sell it, you had to sell it. And even as a solution, it was okay, let's let's get consultants. We're not going to be able to get a full-time employee. We have to get consultants. And why? Because consultants were kind of saying, I make more in a 6-month period than you're willing to pay me for a full year. So, but the point of that is you really have to be able to sell. You really have to be able to get in and understand the problems, I think, and take a step at it, especially for a business case. If it's, you want more staff, what would that do? How would that work? Showing the proof of, look, we're booking overtime, or, we're facing burnout, or there's the whys of, and I think that's what's important in the strategy. If you want diversity, equity, inclusion, if we're talking about, that we want systemic change or equity, here's that pillar, and this helps solve for that pillar, right? You can't stress that enough. I think that's in part what makes it easier to sell on the other side sometimes.
Yeah. And Stephen, I think you made a wonderful point earlier on. If you do have somebody who's, pushing back, you've got to get access to them, and as soon as possible. And what's funny is this QA team I was referring to with this agreement, this has been going on for a long time, and I was not able to pull them in the first go around, and they silently assassinated the whole thing. So if you don't get to them, they are going to get to you, unfortunately. So try everything you can to get access. And again, it's as simple as getting those objections, handling those objections, and that's when you can start the real work.
Yep. No, I think that's a critical point that you made, that you want to get the whys, right? You want to get the why they think it's not working, because that gives you the best ability to be able to you've now got concrete reasons why they don't. And hopefully you can point those out or work with those, right? That's the other hope, right? Is that it will solve for X, or it will solve for Y, or X or Y don't belong in the equation. It's just X that needs to be solved for. Y is handled by this, or it's a collateral piece that's not able to be handled by any software, and it won't even. So it helps you, I guess, guide through, which is key and important. So
100%.
All right. I'm gonna get ready to take some questions. If anybody has questions, you could put them into the chat. Derek, do you have any final words? Although you'll be coming back, folks. So Derek will be coming back for round 2 in week number 9, where we'll be talking about selling the business case and making the presentation. Derek's done that maybe once or twice before, so he can kind of help.
Stephen, on as far as what if folks are thinking about questions or whatnot, just remember this is a people process. You're dealing with people. You're trying to help them essentially, right? And at the end of the day, there's a lot of decisions come with a lot of ownership, and with a lot of ownership comes a lot of fear. So just being able to, again, understand their problems, let them know, what challenges they face, or you understand what a better kind of quality of work life looks like for them. And here's what I understand would make your life better from a engagement, whether that be professional solutions, technology, or anything else that you're doing. If you can pull those pieces of the puzzle together for them, then you're going to have success.
That makes the most sense. I don't see any questions in the chat. So I'm assuming we did such an amazing job that they don't have any questions.
I love it.
I do too. It's good. Um,
Just
so
thinking if any questions do pop up, you know, if the class wants to email you, pass them along. I'm always
okay,
willing to answer
perfect.
offline.
All right. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording and thank everybody for for staying this evening and joining on a late night during the week. I know we're all working. Here come all the thank yous in through the chat. So I'm glad that everybody could make it this evening.